So listen, let's pick back up on power,
Sure.
right? I appreciate the little break. I got tiny tanks. I sit here and just power through fluids all day. And but we were talking about the power isn't just in generation, it's in distribution. And we're going to have to change the way we approach this. And what you were alluding to, I think, is the fear of, we have a lot of people that haven't seen the ball since kickoff, and they could be regulators for all we know, or some authority having jurisdiction over what we're going to be doing as an industry. And that is that is a very fair and valid concern, which is why, to that end, I feel like the only way that we're going to be able to win those battles will be with the voices of this industry, the celebrities of this industry, singing together from the same sheet of music with a collective narrative, because the chorus is going to sing louder than the soloist, but it's going to take you guys that we're all moving in your opposite directions on what you're doing to try to advance this industry. You know, you, Microsoft, Google, all the rest of Meta. And it's now going to take some of those collective voices that were once working because of the fears of engagement with each other, because of the, you know, all the various legal constructs or, you know, the IP that you were generating behind what the product was and what you were rolling out. You're going to have to begin working together. There almost has to be this whole nother collaboration that exists to help us figure out how to rock the industry back and forth a few times before we could tip something over and create a tipping point that allows us to bring on another disruptive change agent like an Elon or a Bezos or something who comes in and says, hey, we focus so much on compute capacity and we focus so much on where we're putting it from an edge perspective to harness and collect, you know, the eyeball content or the video caching. We've worked on everything from the car, from the wheels to the paint, to the radio, to, you know, the performance of the vehicle. The only thing that we haven't really figured out is the sustainability as we scale from an engine perspective, right? And you're bouncing back and forth on how the automotive industry killed the electric vehicle. And what I'm trying to say is there's such a huge tax on grid capacity because of the growth of cloud and the adoption of AI. This huge surge is going to force us to slow down and figure out a long-term solution outside of natural gas generators, or, you know, there's going to have to be a crawl, walk, run, because in 10 years from now, we need to have a better, reliable resource for power. Do you agree?
100%. And
How do we get there?
I think it's going to have to be change of mindset, right? The people that can get us there are the people. This is not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be an easy endeavor. And it's, you know, you are absolutely right. It's going to have to be a common goal, right? So the people like Microsoft, the people like Google, the people like Amazon that have, there's enough customers out there and there's enough demand that I think they can all be very profitable, right? They need to start thinking a little less about themselves and a little about more about what they do, right? And this isn't just about them. This is about changing entire manufacturing sectors, like, you know, manufacturing, right? It's a lot bigger than that. And I think that the folks, because of the attractiveness and the sexiness of these companies, they can attract top talent in the world. That top talent needs to start cohesing together and driving forward a different solution, right? So things like investing in microgrids, don't go in there and disassemble a team that is trying to develop a microgrid for data centers. Invest in it, right? And it's long-term investment, because that microgrid that works for a data center, it's going to work for manufacturing, it's going to work for a hospital system, it's going to work for everything, right? So all the nuances that come in with developing a microgrid have to be invested by the people that will benefit most for it, and it has to be yielded to the world, right? And I don't think we're there yet, right? Like, you know, these cloud providers still think that, hey, what I come up with is novel. It's like, you know what? There's enough. And I remember, right, again, the good lessons I learned back in my time at Amazon was like, hey, there's enough business here for everybody. We want to, you know, kick the crap out of everybody and we want to lead, but we know that there's enough business for everybody. So we want the biggest share of the pie, but the pie is big enough where we can't eat the whole thing, right? And if you take a look at other leaders of industry in companies, that is not the way they're thinking. They're thinking they want that whole pie, and whether, you know, it becomes almost a monopoly, they'd rather have that than say, listen, there's enough business here for everybody. Let's go ahead and together drive ourselves to a second place. I know that's very Smurf-like, right? But that for us to fix the problems that we're encountering these days, that's exactly what we need to do. And I don't think that the maturity is quite there yet. It's the same players that developed this siloed industry.
That's what I'm telling you. That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's us.
I know. That's why I'm trying to bring all of you together. That's why I'm memorializing every one of your stories, because one, you don't realize it because you're still building stuff. I mean, we haven't even got to what you're doing now. We're still stuck in where you were at Amazon, and I'm maybe stuck there because I'm most fascinated on a big section of the growth of this industry where it was the wild, wild west. Do you agree?
It was.
And that's exciting. I loved this industry because it was reinventing itself every month. And it was almost like the arms race. If you're on the outside, it was like, what's Furlong doing? What's Kava doing? What's Bilotti doing? What's Oz doing? And we were just trying to pay attention to what these 4 groups or 5 groups are doing, because that had a ripple effect on what all the operators were doing, both on the wholesale and the retail side, back when there was a retail side that was still much more prevalent, right? And then what does that look like on the entire ecosystem? How does that impact real estate agents or real estate brokers that are out finding land and going through the entitlements to get ready to put big parcels on new emerging markets in Ohio or Atlanta or something? But at the same time, what was the impact on design? How did that impact the A&E teams? How did that impact the construction teams? What did that do for the supply chains from an equipment perspective? For the OFE, the owner furnished equipment, or the OFCI, it was what was the impact on the labor demand, right? Because technology was allowing us not to lower the bar for what we needed, but now you had emerging technology that even the trades were able to adopt, to where now they have a Bluetooth sync on their torque wrench that logs every time the electricians are tightening down cables on, some tap or some busway somewhere. Like, everything's being memorialized and documented faster. Efficiencies are being improved. Quality is increased. And I think that schedule, QA/QC, and commissioning, are 3 tickets that we see a lot of opportunity for growth through technology, because you could put technology on a helmet for someone that has no industry experience, and we could give them a set of drawings and a one line and say, walk around the job site all day just roving with this camera, collecting data, and then someone else will aggregate and read that data. And as they could read the tea leaves well, because they have experience, they could say, hey, based on the schedule and based on what you just showed me in this video, we're 5 days behind schedule, right? Or, hey, we're ahead of schedule. Either way, I could quantify if I'm on schedule, I could measure risk against what happens to a project when it's behind schedule. Most of the unscheduled work that happens as a byproduct of equipment showing up to a job site is where a lot of the injuries and accidents take place. Unscheduled work is where most injuries take place. But you're trying to understand, how do I quantify risk to schedule if I'm ahead or behind? And I could economically measure that as well, because we know how much we're deploying on a daily basis out here. We know what we're spending on a monthly basis. We could just do the math and divide by 30, right? And you can figure out how much the cost is every day. So every day that I have a display, I could say, well, I'm behind on this much money, right? So technology is doing a beautiful thing, but it's you guys that started this industry that are going to be the ones that are going to have to champion how we get power to support the growth, because we went and hit a plateau with IoT, then we hit a plateau with cloud, and now we're getting ready to hockey stick jump again right into AI. And we have a lot of people that are waiting for someone to lead. And finally, along the lines, I realized that there's about 10 to 40 people in this industry that probably represent about 90% of these industry decisions. Do you agree?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. So my job was to try to build a platform where I could bring a few of those people on here and try to get them each to talk about it in a way to where it's your own convictions. It's not me trying to, and if I could harness those, then I can make it to where the chorus is loud enough to where now we could actually draw meaningful changes that are really laser targeted on exactly what we need in the industry, instead of someone, to your point, that has no idea what we're doing. And like you said, they wake up in the morning, they brush their teeth, and they don't even understand half of our language. And they're going to be responsible. That's like giving this whole program over to the DMV to be in charge of trying to regulate how we could grow. The only people that'll suffer will be the consumer, right? Because the consumers are what are adopting emerging technologies that put the strain and pressure on those that create the platforms and the applications that we adopt. And now they're being hamstrung on how they can scale because now there's not enough power to support it.
I had an interesting, and this is, thank you for, the kudos on creating this industry, but I do think that at times we tend to be our own worst enemies, right? And there is a reason why I don't attend conferences or, I've been kicked out of a couple of very elite industry groups because, I just refuse to, adhere to the rules, right? And why, right? Because it's the same people asking the same questions over and over and over again, right? Very little room, right? I'm not going to give you names, but there's a list, literally a handful of names that always take the entire oxygen in the room in those, and that's got to stop, right? Like one of the things we have to do is stay humble, stay hungry, right? Steve Jobs.
Humble, hungry, and smart. Pat
Right.
Lencioni said it too. Yep, I'm with you.
So what happens is we just need to quit looking at this and believing our own press. The day that you believe your own press is the day that you need to go ahead and figure out how to take yourself off that newspaper, right? Because we're human, right? You're going to undoubtedly come in and say, wow, look at all these things I've done. Look at all these things I've created. I'm awesome. It's like, you know what? It's the why the blank slate? The blank slate's to make sure. Why the non-attendance of conferences? The non-attendance of a conference is the same thing for the blank slate, not bias. The way that you're doing things yesterday, and you may, at the end of the blank slate, the exercise is like, how would you build this? Right? You may come up with the exact same solution that you've been working with since, the year 2000, and that's perfectly okay because you did a validation check, and the validation proved, right, without without any influences as much as you could, that what you're doing is the right thing for now. But you have to pressure test that solution again and again and again, and if something comes up, you have to be don't be afraid of change, right? I've seen so many projects that I know would have been successful, that fear or a slight change caused the entire project to go sideways. And then you go back and you're, $5 million per megawatt over budget. And you go back, it's like, how did this happen? It's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have taken your plinth from 48 inches to 24 inches, which created a much smaller spot underneath your component for you to actually tier your electrical and mechanical distribution, which forced you to go overhead, which forced you to reinforce every single piece of steel, which forced another year worth of changes, which forced another $5-6 million per megawatt on your deployment.
Yeah.
Maybe if you would have thought of exactly what that change that was asked, that you accepted, right? And then you go back to your GC and say, well, how could this have happened? It's like, you created that change. So again, right, it's sitting there and coming in and saying, okay, what are the consequences for me doing things the same, or what are the consequences for me doing things different? Consequences are you could fail miserably if you do things differently. Consequences for doing things the same on something that was initially thought out to be different is that you're going to have an unsuccessful project that went over time and over budget. And you have to be cognizant from day one and say, you know what? I understand this is a risk. If I hit a home run on this one, it's my 300 ball player, right? Yeah. I hit it over the fence and I can replicate this.
So what were some of the big challenges that you were seeing when you were at AWS and the magnitude of scale that you were going at? What were some of the greatest lessons that you took away from that phase of that chapter of your journey?
The challenges was keeping up with the growth within financial constraints. Okay. Right? Not that's a bad thing because that forces you to make decisions, but sometimes decisions were optimized for cost and for nothing but cost. And sometimes
business.
That is business. But sometimes, right, one of the things that I would say that you have to come in heads high, it's what was good, respect what was, right? So we'll take a look at one particular data center in Virginia for AWS. And the day that we needed to put that data center together, we were under severe budget constraints. We weren't sure the company was going to be around for the next 6 months. So everything we had to do was to make sure that every investment. So we purchased, And the folks that know me will laugh about this. We purchased, I think it was 12 generators that had like, I don't know, 50,000 operational hours. And we knew that if our costs were super cheap, and it was at the time when Google was absorbing all capacity all over the world. It's like today, right? You ordered a generator, you paid like $1.4 million, and you could expect it in 140 weeks from the day that you order it, right? So we went and purchased these animals in Argentina. Put them in a ship, delivered them in Baltimore, brought them to our data center in Virginia. We knew if we got 8 generators, we knew we were going to be lucky, 8 good working generators that could provide the backup capacity right at the time, right? Like it was back in the mid 2000s. We made that decision. We launched 8 generators. We brought the data center up on time and well within budget, which was a big win. We also knew that those generators had an expiry date, and we didn't quite know what that expiry date was going to be. Well, that expiry date became the day that, AWS became a monster, and Jassy said, "I need to get rid of all those units and put in new ones."
Really?
Right. So but at that time we had operated these things for 5-6 years, minimal outages. We knew that it was a labor of love keeping them up and running. Right. But they provided what we needed to provide at that time. And we knew that they would have to be changed out. Right.
They were a Band-Aid.
They were a Band-Aid that lasted us 6-7 years.
You do that. Yeah. You were building, while you were building those teams and you were building those data centers, it's that concept and principle applies to building labor teams, right? I mean, you will hire people. I've learned now, I started a business in 2019, and someone was asking me what the greatest lessons I've learned. The most humbling lesson I learned is the mistake that I was making was I was only hiring the people I needed today, right? I would hire people because they were the solution that I needed right now. And I had to be thinking 2 to 4 years in advance. What would I need in 2 years from now? Because those that get you here may not be the ones that get you there, right? So I'm like, I have to start future-proofing my labor, my teams, and make sure I'm hiring people that are I expect this is where we're going to be in 2 years from now. Will this person be able to still be that? If they're holding that title today, when I scale to that level, will they still be able to do that? And if they can't, then I need to be able to look at them like the Band-Aid, like engines, like, okay, that's fine. I could do this, but I'm going to have to replace that person. The difference is replacing equipment may have an impact on infrastructure, but it doesn't impact culture. Replacing people has an impact on culture, right? So like I have to measure the dynamics with both ends against the middle, efficiency and output and productivity. And how does that contribute to my culture? Right. So I'm trying to do the same thing that you're doing, which is why I'm paying close attention to what those people that were building large scale machines of companies were doing. You had to do it with people as well. Right.
On that, bringing it back to culture, for me, the greatest lesson in that was coming in, as I said, heads high, right? You know that you're going to have to make changes, and you're doing that right now, right? And you're going to minimize the impact because culture wins everything, right? And I had a boss saying that culture eats
strategy for breakfast.
For breakfast, that's not true. You need both.
You do need both.
You need both. If you decide to over pivot on one and sacrifice the other, it's not going to work. It is absolutely 100% not going to work. You will end up in a bad place.
I think that this is what I would say. The way I interpreted that quote, and I've used it in presentations that I've given, was that as long as you have a healthy enough culture, if your strategy isn't right, you can pivot from that strategy and survive as long as you have a culture of those that are ready to ride or die with you, so to speak. And I do think that culture is more important than strategy, but I also agree with you, you need both because strategies are iterative. Like one of the greatest advantages in business that you have to have if you're in labor like I am is versatility and agility, right? Meaning like I have to be able to pivot based on, I have no idea what there's an Oz at AWS still, there's an Oz at every company, so to speak, right? And those people can wake up today and they have learned that there's a better mean or method that they need to begin to adopting. And without any understanding, one day you make a decision that it's like this equivalency of throwing a huge boulder into a pond. Well, I may be sitting at the edge of that pond and that ripple is going to hit me eventually. But by the time that it does, I may not even understand where it's coming from or why. And I'm just now responding to something that's happening and I don't even understand how I could get ahead of that, right? For right now, I'm trying to draw you out and humanize these elements of you, because those that know you or think that they know you or they heard of you probably don't understand the trials and tribulations you had to go through while you're simultaneously building something that's never really been invented yet. It's a major contributor to one of the most aggressively fastest growing industries in the world, while you have to maintain culture, right? Culture in your teams. And when you contribute to your culture by injecting more people too that can benefit your culture, they also have an impact on strategy, right? So everything you're doing there is you iterate on designs and patents that you do for that. You kind of had to do the same thing with humans, right? So when I go back to like, what are some of the things that you learned the most, or one of the greatest things that you have? What are some of the other stories that you have about that? And then I'll let you close the chapter on the Amazon stuff. And I'm not trying to keep you just in this purgatory of window, but that was a window in time in which, when you were there, those were some of the most profound changes taking place in the industry, right? And I was just trying to give some context to those that are listening, that they're coming in here and they don't understand how we got here. They don't even understand where we're at. Some of them don't, but some that have been here the whole time, I want them to understand how we got to where we're at. I think Christian did a good job, and I'm hoping that they're going to get the value out of this.
Good stuff. I think, culture and strategy, I think that the biggest driver, you can't pivot too high. My lesson is that you can't pivot too much on either one or the other. You have to be cognizant, and it may be a skill that not all of us, I may not have it, right? But it's understanding where one is going to benefit the other, and be like, instead of being a constraint to the other, it needs to be a driver of the other, right? So it needs to not interfere, but push the secondary component forward, right? The one thing, right, in AWS, what I learned is that the culture was being driven by strategy, right? And the strategy was to be the best at what they put on the table, right? And I could understand that, right? Like, I mean, there are sacrifices you're going to make. If you've been successful at anything you've done, it's not a matter of like me saying, hey, I can write any test. At one point, the test writing doesn't matter anymore. Right, like at one point, the delivery is all that matters at the end of that, right? So you no longer, like, whatever intrinsic skill you have of being able to predict what's coming on a test or forecast what's coming on a test, doesn't matter. You're not being tested.
What you're able to do is all that matters. The delivery of your platform is how you're going to be measured and weighed.
And for coming in, the ability to let the teams, and this is, for me, it's been difficult, to just let the team go and say, bring me what you think is going to be whatever solution to the problem you're working on, and I'm going to trust you. I call that underwriting, underwriting the risk. So I'm going to go ahead and insure you for that risk. So good or bad, right? I'm going to take accountability for the risk. If you succeed, it's all yours. If you fail, I'm writing the checks for your failure like an insurance company, right? And I think that sometimes tends to be lost in your ability to really let a team develop, because what can happen is, and this, will happen with people that may not have the self-confidence that you can recover from a failure. It's like, oh my God, if it fails, my reputation is at risk. It's like, but if it succeeds, it's going to make your reputation, right? By you underwriting that risk. So you're going to have to come in and say, this is a 50-50 or a 40-60 or even a 30-70 play. The 300 ball player, 30, it's a 30-70 play, but I'm going to underwrite the risk, and I'm going to underwrite 10 of these risks. If I put together a team with enough 300 players, I'm going to deliver. And I think that, the conference is the high profile speaking groups, right? People don't check their freaking egos at the door. They come in.
It's funny you say that. So I started a conference in 2015, and I even think it's the type of conference that even a person like you that doesn't like, it's called DCAC, the Data Center Anti-Conference. And I did it because I didn't think the industry needed another conference. I felt that it needed a better one. And what I say by that is there was a time where I would go to the same conferences, whether it was DCD New York or Chicago or Dallas or San Francisco, and it was the same people talking about the same narrative. And it was, they were just packaging up the same stuff. And there was really nothing new that was being brought out. And it was really the same voices. And there were a lot of emerging people that had a lot of good ideas. And it was almost like I felt like there needed to be another platform where you could have a David versus Goliath, where if you're going to have the chief data center officer of that company, go speak at 5 DCDs or 7x24s, I'm like, why don't I make an anti-conference where we bring on and we put a platform there for people that don't otherwise have a voice? And then if I let the booze pour earlier in the day, and I make all the fun things happen inside the conference, then people won't leave. And if I could get more people there and they're not leaving, and I'm letting them loosen up with a beer or two, and they start opening up and generating real relationships with other people that they otherwise would never have the chance to probably be in a room with and meet, the byproduct of that is that you end up having a greater exchange of ideas. So people like you and I that would have never, like when you were Oz Amazon and I was Kirk, we would have never been in orbit with each other because you were at a different altitude and airspeed altogether. Not that you've lowered yours, right? It's just that I have a platform now that allows me to be in touch with a lot of other players. And I'm trying to use that like I did the conference where I was trying to put new voices on the stage, people that were not being heard at other places, and they were disruptive and they had ideas and they were bold and provocative. And I wanted that. I didn't want to go to the other places where I could hear the same thing over and over again. I wanted once a year, we have one conference here in Austin at ACL, which is a huge music venue. So the energy's different, the vibe's different. And I would put people that normally weren't on stage talking about things that weren't normally being talked about. And I didn't ask people and be like, hey, can you come to this conference and talk about these topics? I'm like, what is the most passionate thing that you have for this industry right now? That's what you and I, when we first talked, I'm like, I want to talk about what you're excited to talk about, because it could be like religion. If you have a PhD in theology, you could get on a stage and talk about it from a book perspective, but you're not going to radiate your passion in that if you're an atheist, right? But if you're a Southern Baptist and I put that Bible in your hand and you get on that stage, you're orating and people are like, me too, and I want to excite those people on stage. So I try to put people up there and be like, hey, Poke, let it go. What do you want to get off your chest? What do you think this industry needs for change? Not harmonious exchanges. Let's start getting a little bit more disruptive. Let's scratch the paint on a few ideas. Let's challenge what people are thinking that we need to do, because I hear a lot of keywords and cheeky phrases being regurgitated and repeated by people that don't even understand what the hell they're talking about. But it's very vogue because they've heard this and they know that that's prevalent and they've heard that this is also emerging, but they don't really understand it, right? But if I bring on someone, their job isn't to help them understand it all. Their job is to make them know that there's a reason why they need to go educate themselves in this industry. And that's why I was creating a different conference. And that's the reason why I created this platform, this podcast, right? Is so I could sit down with people like you and be like, all right, what do we need to be unpackaging right now? Because a lot of people, like Christian said it best on his, he goes, I don't want to focus on things that other people are already focused on. I want to focus on the next thing. And I want it to be something that I can make a change to. I don't invest my energy or effort into things that I can't change. So when you and I talked the first time, right, I was like, and you were like, well, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, no. What do you want to talk about? For me, I said, in all fairness, I want to talk about where you started. I want people to know who you are, where you come from, because I think a lot of people understand, a lot of people know who you are. Every industry has celebrities. Do you know who Kobe Bryant is? Of course, but you didn't know him, right? We all know the celebrities of our industry. We just don't know enough about them. And I'm not going to sit down and I love data center knowledge. I love Data Center Hawk and Data Center Frontier, and they publish great material, but I'm not going to be able to sit down and read that stuff. I could listen to this podcast while driving to the gym, while getting online at the airport. When I'm driving home from a long day at the office, I can educate myself while driving by listening to a long version context of people's stories. Now, hopefully people are going to come off this and be like, I could totally relate to what this guy did. And I can understand how he got into this. I wasn't getting into the data center industry too. And I found my way into this through a friend. And now that I'm here, I realize it's the best kept secret in terms of industries. And I love this industry. Don't you?
Well, I love it. I mean, the pure brain power, like, Christian and I are different animals. Christian is...
You went to go work for him, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I worked with him. I mean, we've had a long relationship, and my going to work with Christian was to put our name on a patent together. We did that, and then that ship sailed, right? So we did that. All things being equal, he's very innovative. I mean, he is thinking many years ahead of the, I'm probably more to the, let's solve today's problem with today's tool, right? So I'm pulled back. He is a innovator. I am an executioner. right?
Nice.
So and that's why we worked well together, right? Because like if the dog hunts, I'm going hunting.
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
So to me, the problems that I like to solve are today problems where, I may not be able to, influence them immediately, but I'll continue coming to the well to influence them, right? And eventually, if I can put myself on a platform to create something new and innovative, that's exactly what I'll do, right? And that's why I am where I'm at right now, right? Because, the constraints have been removed from me and I can create. What that looks like tomorrow, I have no idea, but I do know what challenges we have to overcome, clearly, especially with the advent of AI. And by the way, inference isn't here yet, right? And when inferencing comes here, which is after the language learning models that are being pretty well, NVIDIA owns the entire market on that changes yet again, right?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that. And at the same time, you went from Amazon. Did you go to Microsoft right after that?
No. I went from Amazon. Spent some time working with Digital Realty for Bill Stein, working on the generation data centers with a great team at Digital as well that they put in place, 8 years ago. That kind of withstood the test of time. Multi-story data centers, closed loop cooling systems, etc. And then spent 2 minutes at NVIDIA. Then had to leave NVIDIA due to some personal issues that came up, and then started with Microsoft after the 18 months NDA expired, non-compete has expired. So that's what I did, jumped around a little bit, and then started and spent 5 years with Microsoft.
Yeah, I would say you were there for a bit. And then when you left, I'm trying to get from where you're at Microsoft to what you're doing today. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about what you're doing today too, right? And then I want to go back to what you and I originally talked about, which was, what's the most passionate thing? What's your passion project, passion position? Like, I know that, when you talk to Christian, I'm like, what's your number one focus right now? He pioneered something too. And he's like, I want to inspire people to continue to drive change. Up, over, and out. That's his thing. And for you, as a person that wants to continue to drive a higher level or standard of execution, what are the things that led you to what you're doing today? What are you doing today? And what are the things that are most passionate? What are the things that you're most passionate about now, knowing what you've learned and what all you've been exposed to?
Sure. After spent 5 years and I left a year today from Microsoft and went back to work for Bill Stein because he wanted me to kind of generate the yet next generation, so the AI focused data center designs for Digital Realty. Bill Stein left. I worked for Andy Power for 2 minutes, and then a friend of mine knocked on my door for this opportunity with tiny little company, Denvr Dataworks, right? They provide AI. It's AI cloud solution, small little company, but it kind of opened my eyes because I've been fortunate. I've been super lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And with Microsoft, we kind of pioneered a project where we're looking at super high density stacks with single phase liquid immersed cooling. Right. And this is the, go to market for companies like Alibaba and BitDance in Asia Pac, where they effectively just dump a server inside a dielectric fluid and use stratification of the density of the fluid in order to cool the heat flux being generated by the computing components in the servers, right? So super simple solution. Again, it goes back to simplicity is elegance, right? So you can, with...
Do you think that'll be a standard, like a glycol, mineral oil base? I don't know, whatever it's going to be.
I would love it for it to become standard because of the things that it brings to the table.
That we're going
150 kW on a 48 OU tank, right? And being
crazy.
Distributed with 50 volt DC a bus, so you're going to DC, so you're removing an entire the simplicity of it and the work that we started doing at Microsoft is what really said, there's a there. Right. And that's today's problem, right? Like, I don't know if you've had, if you've ever seen an H100 stack which is the NVIDIA GPU with their servers, so their 8-way GPU servers with 11 networking drops to each server. right? About a 6U or an 8U chassis, you've got, 11 individual networking drops. And then you've got an entire cluster of these that behave like one large supercomputer,
Oh, wow.
right? So suddenly you run into this thing called cabling density and the cabling weight. And I mean, you're looking at it and it is literally hundreds and hundreds of cables coming together in single. And then you've got the cooling problem, right? You've got this thing called InfiniBand or Roki network in the background that, these devices are super sensitive to temperatures, which means that, they can really give you grief if they run into any overheating problems. So you've got like massive cable density. You've got servers that need to work together in unison in reference architectures, all through air cooled, and now they're going to liquid to chip cool, which involves all sorts of other complications. And for me, it's like we started doing work where we just dunked these in the dielectric fluid and ran crazy density.
Were you just trying to blow the doors off them like a DVT test where you're like, let's see what's the limitation you were trying to redline?
Correct.
That's fun.
So again, right. So this, so what ended up happening is we started taking a look at cabling lengths, right? So you're looking with fiber with fiber transmitters that require you to run 50, 100 meters, like the solutions that we're putting together, allow us to run these cables 20 meters. So we can actually go to copper if we wanted to, right? So we're, kind of changing the methodology. And to me, at the end of the day, it's all about density, right? Especially with the AI and with the inference components that are coming in, with the inference loading requirements. You're going to need as many CPUs and GPUs as close together as humanly possible. And I believe, right, from my perspective, the ultimate solution, right? Your North Star is going to be some kind of two-phase cooling solution because it's elegant, right? Like, you got a liquid that boils at 50 degrees C. Problem is in there. You've got a contained vessel. You're going to have to deal with some pressures. You've got a lot of moving components, and eventually these things break, right? If it was built by humans, it's going to break eventually, which means that you're going to have a methodology to repair these things, right? So again, right, the way I look at it is like, is it going to take? I don't know. I hope so, but we're going to die trying, right? And
that's what you're doing now.
That's what we're doing now.
Okay, so the name of the company again is Denvr
Dataworks.
I'm sorry.
It's a cloud AI company that focuses on one piece, single phase cooling solution. We have got air cooled out there. It's interesting. And
is it designed more for like an AI environment, like the next gen data center environment? That's what you're working on. Okay, so the Open Compute Forum. I had Rob Coyle on here. You're engaged with him, I'm sure.
Correct. Yeah. Amy Short, she's a PhD. She's the inventor of Lubrisol's Compusol oil. She works with us and she's deeply engaged in with OCP. I'm less so, but her and I collaborate and we got a bunch of solutions on the works as well for going forward. So that's kind of what we're tackling today. It's a lot of fun because there aren't a lot of rules written around it.
It's the Wild Wild West still. I try to explain this to people. They're like, yeah, I'm in the pharmaceutical industry and all these things. And they're like, yeah, we don't get to do all these things. I'm like, my industry is wide open. Like, does that work? Let's try that. I mean, whatever the greatest application is wins, or the greatest solution is wins. Does that make sense?
I believe so.
I think that the only thing that will have constraint to change will be when we discover that humans don't iterate and evolve nearly as fast or as quickly as we can technology, right? Human biology doesn't evolve as fast as what we can do with the technology that we're playing with. Do you agree?
100%. I mean, like again, for us, this is, if you're curious, this is the industry you need to double down on, right? Because the problems that we are solving, like we don't even know when the problems are going to be around the corner. Like I keep on mentioning inference. Inference is, language learning model, just a bunch of models that are training the right or training unknown outcomes. ChatGPT is all inference because when you type in, right, it inferences all your language learning models to give you the answer, right? Eventually, when you've got, when you start, when the number of language learning models starts decreasing because you've got a finite number of processing you're going to do, it's the questions that are being asked that need to be answered that it's inference, right? That is going, like, we have no idea what that world is going to look like. And I'm telling you right now, from a power perspective, from a density perspective, from a networking perspective, from a compute perspective, we have no idea what that's going to look like. But it's going to be a nuclear explosion in our industry.
So I agree. I think that there's this industry is on its path to becoming more mainstream. Do you agree?
Oh,
I think that as people begin to discover, and let's use the finance, institutional lender, it doesn't matter where the money comes from. There's a lot of pent up demand from people that want to deploy capital and they want to do it into this industry, right? So there's a lot of money people trying to focus more on this. And when you're watching the Wall Street Journal or, there's a lot of large written news organizations now that are publishing stuff about data centers. It's normally like BlackRock's doing this or QTS is doing, but now you're seeing data centers talked about more on the front cover or the front page. And that's why I'm like, hey, it's time for us. I'll eventually, Christian had an idea. He's like, why don't I take all this content and write a 4-hour documentary, right? Where all these people, there's enough, I'm in orbit with enough of you senior people now to where I can collect data that can be literally giving to groups that could use it to educate. All right. Hey, today we're going to talk about data centers. We're in school. We're going to talk about that and engineering concepts. But this is where that industry started. It'll be in the history books. One day it'll come back to that conversation that you were having with the guy that's the CEO of Amazon. And he's like, why aren't we monetizing all this capacity we're not using 80% of the time? And boom, next thing you know, you have the cloud. And next thing you know, you're the biggest cloud providers in the world. And that means you have a lot of compute energy and compute power you have to solve for. And that changes the supply chain. That changes the entire ecosystem of industry. And then it draws people in. And then those people that are coming in from other industries are pollinating this industry with other means and methods, ideas that help advance this industry, right? And I want to know, like, what do you see coming next? What do you see the biggest changes that are going to take place in this industry? And when do you see them taking shape? Do you think there'll be a huge pivotal shift in the industry in 2024 as an example? Do you see that it's not till 2033 do we actually have a long-term sustainable problem or a solution for energy as we scale? Because I believe that when we adopt nuclear power as a resource or a solution for what we're doing, I think that it also solves the global warming problem that we're talking about. I think climate change will be the greatest beneficial or benefactor is a byproduct of what we do when we shift from plugging less things into coal and plugging more things into a small modular reactor that's, within a certain range of your neighborhood where it's not just a generation source, but it could distribute that power really close and locally.
I mean, I do believe, I think that the changes will not be evolutionary, but they won't be revolutionary either. Right, like I think that they're going to be somewhere in the middle, revolutionary, right? Like with separating the RE from the evolution. The reason is we need, like, for us to, if we've hit our peak, and sometimes, again, going back to the problem that we solved with ChatGPT very easily, right? I think that we are becoming lazy in our mindset, right? Like we are relying on the cloud to provide us answers. They're not creative answers. The cloud or AI will never provide. The day that it starts giving us creative answers, I think that that's going to be a really difficult discussion.
When it's sentient or whatever when it's
Cyberdyne.
Right, well, right now it's regurgitating input that we already put into a model. So now it's just querying that data and getting us to some sort of input factor some other human being probably put into it. And it's learning, it's probably in the 5th or 10th grade right now, who knows? Imagine when it's really sophisticated and mature, but it's learning, right?
That's right.
And one day it won't give us answers that we gave it or programmed it to give us when we query it or answer it. It is going to originate a new one, and that's going to advance medicine and science and engineering.
Because we're limited in what we can solve for those problems, right? And how do we get there? You are correct, right? And it's not right for us to put, like, as an industry, to put the onus on existing operators to provide us with the power and cooling or whatever it is. It should be a two-way street, right? You take a look at the Scandinavian countries and they're going like, hey, you put a data center and you're putting some heat recovery mechanisms to make sure that we give back to the communities. It's expensive. I think the ROI isn't quite there, but it is the right thing to do, right? And I am super happy that the major cloud operators are actually thinking that way, right? So don't fear the unknown. And what do I mean by that? It's like, okay, we got air cooled data centers, spitting temperature, air temperatures out at 35 to 40 degrees C, low quality heat recovery, but it still works. Let's find a solution if we can spit that air out at 80 degrees C. Right? And suddenly you got a 2x increase in the usability of the thermal energy stored in that air. Or water. What if we start pumping out water at 90 or maybe superheated water over 100 degrees C for somebody to recover? Now you got something, right? You got this high quality that you can actually, slice off and create some kind of energy on the other end, right? You've got water that can boil. Boiling water is a beautiful thing, that latent change, right? The same thing, the same deal with two-phase cooling. You're boiling a fluid. Don't underestimate the power of that latent change, right? So suddenly, so again, where's this industry going? Where's the unknown? We don't know.
What do you think, though? Like, where are you positioning yourself? What do you think the most significant changes that we're staring down the barrel of in the next? It's hard to predict anything outside of 6 months. So I try to look at everything like, there's a linear trend. I could project where I've been in the last 6 quarters. And if you draw a long enough line and you connect all the dots and you push that out another 6 quarters, in theory, you're going to see what you should expect to be the linear trend. But the reality is we're introducing new things into our world from a technology basis, as well as the technology that we're using to build the home for technology, right? I was just at there's a company that we were just talking about, and I was at their partner summit in Baltimore this week, and they are talking about the multiple ways that they use technology to have less clash coordination studies, by using Oculuses as they walk in, or they're using GoPros on this for others to collect data. That there's so much that we're doing to adopt and use technology ourselves to advance the means and how, like, the speed of delivery, the quality of what we're delivering, and as a byproduct of those two things, the cost is going down as we're building these products. We're using technology to do it faster and cheaper, while simultaneously making it so we're capable of creating a stronger engine for technology to advance the ability to get more adoption of it. Does that make sense? I mean, we're building a self-sustaining machine here that we get to use to build it faster for itself.
Absolutely. I mean, you take a look at, 400 gig, 800 gig, 1600 gig, 3200 gig. That's the connection speed between all those clusters of GPUs, right? And they keep going up. Today, the standard's 400. The standard that we're talking about, we're building for 1600 gig because we know that that's coming, right? So who says we're not building a neural network with more capable systems that give us specific, true and tried solutions, because it's iterated to those true and tried solutions that gives us the solutions to problems that would take us years to come up with, right? Design, the latest and greatest trend is that, folks out there really believe that AI can help design a quantum computer.
Yeah.
Right?
I've heard it.
So suddenly, forums are popping up, conferences are popping up. That's scary, right? Because a quantum computer, right? We've tried and failed many, many, many times. And this is really a viable and we compute density. And I believe that density is the ultimate game into this, because the more computers or the more systems that can compute packed together, the closer
in a smaller footprint.
In a smaller footprint, you are delivering a neutron, you are delivering a network.
Yeah.
Right? A network that is highly capable to solve problems.
It's a utility. Right.
Correct.
You're creating another utility that's as important as power and plumbing itself. What do you think? Do you have any predictions, or do you have any ideas of what you think this industry is wasting its time on?
I think we're wasting our time in applauding our accolades. Our accolades are not what we think they are today. They need to be into the future. Right? They need to be that kid, maybe from the University of Alberta, and in Christian's case, University of Texas, that came in bright-eyed, right? Not knowing that he was going to be the creator, or she was going to be the creator of PUE, one of the simplest, most elegant metrics that, no matter how we try to replace it, we always go back to, right? That's what I think.
Standardizing with more metrics. Yeah. Is that what you're talking
Simpler, standardizing with more metrics, simpler metrics.
about? Okay.
Right? Don't complicate it, right? Just be elegant, be simple. And right now we need to be doubling down and listening to the people that in our, like if you're inside, the top 40, that assuming that just because they're coming out of school, they know nothing, because the greatest ideas are going to be the ones that come from them, because they're not biased by anything they've seen.
There's no limit to construct. They're on the outside looking in, and they have no idea what the capabilities or the limitations that should be.
But they have access to more compute. I started out on a Super Pet.
Did you really?
I did, right? On an Apple Super Pet, right? Today, I love my Surface. I think it's a well-built portable product, super capable, right? These kids, they grew up with iPads or Androids in their hands. So they're coming in open mind, with more resources than we could ever have imagined. We need to make them, we need to listen to them.
So it's funny that you say that, because that's the genesis behind my push, right? I feel like the industry won't be able to, I think that there's so many cool industries. The energy vertical still has a lot of cool things that are going on. Healthcare has a lot of cool things that are going on. A lot of commercial and industrial groups that are doing a lot of cool things for distribution. For us to go hire talent and recruit talent that would otherwise want to go work for Tesla or a SpaceX, maybe, we need to get those big fat brains of kids at Stanford or the kids at Cornell, like Chris went, or like Christian went, or wherever they go. I don't care. Or coming from the fleet. If you're former military like me, there's a lot of talented people that come from the military that could either apply that skill set right back into the trades, which would contribute to our industry, or right into the industry in general. I think construction will one day become one of the coolest jobs that most kids will hopefully get into, because they get to build, and they're literally building something of significance to community, to society, and humanity by building the sky for the cloud or the home for AI. And I think that we need to make this industry more popular. It's my kids know about it, your kids know about it, but their friends probably never even, your kids' friends probably did not know about this industry until your kids were telling them what their dad did, right? And a lot of us that got in this industry, even your story, you didn't get in this industry. Well, back in that time, there wasn't really an industry. They called it, it was still taking shape and arriving, but we're still in its infancy. Not really. I think that we're becoming more mature. We're a 25-year-old now, right? At 25, you're dangerous, right? So I think that we have the ability to do some special shit in the next 10 years. I think in the next 10 years, this industry has the ability to make a greater change on humanity than any other industry in the world, because every other industry's capabilities and limitations to their own growth, whether you're in healthcare or you're in the medical industry and you want to be able to have better technology in an ER to save more lives, it does not matter. Every other industry's growth, whether you're the airline industry or automotive industry, it's going to come back to the aggregation of data. Data is the most valuable commodity in the world, which is why we're in a digital economy. And when you could get more talent focused this direction, then we're going to grow, right? And I just think that we need to be able to find a way to make this a more mainstream industry that will make it easier for people to bring their passion and their talent to us, so they could tuck it up underneath people that know what to do with that talent and can go start testing the hypothesis of what we should be doing next. Like, we know that there needs to be a long-term path to get to nuclear, but that's not today. We know that we're going to have to eventually get there, but that could probably take us 10 years. What are the stepping stones and the milestones? What are the gates that we're going to have to go through between now and then to, one, bring the talent into this industry that will work in the capacity for jobs that don't even exist yet. And they're going to be bringing on a skill set that they don't even have yet, that they don't even realize can apply to a completely different application than ones that they already know. They're already prevalent on, other verticals of industry, but now with us, like, we want to bring that talent in here because they're going to be the next generation that advances the ball, don't you think?
I do, and it's not, like we mentioned some pretty high popular schools, right? I always look at the effort and the potential of a person versus the schooling of the person, right? So 9 out of 10 times, I'd rather take, the individual that had to work hard.
Night school kid.
Like that. My director of engineering now here, right? James Cuoto, he had to get to where he did the hard way, right? Went to tech college, then, went to a university that was extremely hard because they gave him 2 full years of credit. So he stepped into, second year or third year engineering, electrical engineering with an associate's degree behind him, which, was not an easy, couldn't have been any, I've been there, right? Like I know what the trials and tribulations that he had to, that kid is creative as hell. Right? Like you give him a problem, right? Like he's, a son of immigrants. He's going to go out and figure it out.
Creativity's the king though.
He's going to figure it out, right? And sometimes, a little bit too much, like, hey, you need to slow your horses there because that may not work because of X, Y, Z. But I'd rather have him prove me wrong, right? And say, actually, I think you're wrong. He is open-minded, right? He will say, no, I think you're wrong. And I love those discussions because, man, you can rule the world if you're there, right? And again, right, the way I see it, the conferences, the talks is like, 2 years ago at a very selective a group of people, I heard how the Chinese were going to kick our butts when it came down to AI. It's like, I get it, right? I get it. And they are not constrained by things like bureaucracy. They have no constraints, right? Like if they need to test on people, they do, right? And that puts us at a substantial disadvantage because we have, a different mindset in how we drive forward. So what I want to hear is not how they're kicking our ass. It's how we are going to respond and how we are going to, within very tight ethics, drivers, going to get to where we need to be able to at least match and hopefully beat what the competition looks like. I don't hear that.
What do you see? What do you see in the next, 6 months to a year, this industry changing, or do you see any big shifts that are all taking place this year?
I do. Again, when it comes just to straight up MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing solutions, we are now at the limits of our capabilities to cool the inbound stacks. And you know this. You're in the construction, you're seeing everybody's trying to find the secret next way, right? I do think that we have to be, and again, this really involves people coming in with an open mind as an industry and not saying, hey, I'm going to do good for G or I'm going to do good for Microsoft and I'm going to do good for AWS. So I'm going to put that agenda foremost. It actually has to be one where you actually check your employer at the door. And that starts with the employers saying like, you're free to do as what you think you need to do to collaborate, right? Because, Christian going on his own or Joseph Cava going on his own or me going on my own, it's not going to create the richness of us together solving a problem and sharing the solution amongst us.
Do you think there needs to be another coalition of some kind? I know there's infrastructure mason, there's other things that take place. There's small pockets of innovators and thought leaders that get together. What do you think is lacking? What do you think is necessary to drive some of these changes that we both agree are necessary?
Well, first of all of us are at a point, the Chris Malones of the world, that are at a point where personal kudos should be of non-importance. Right? The award, it doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't.
Just get it done.
Right? It should be, let's see what the problem is and let's solve it holistically for the industry.
How do you do that? When do you do that? What's the collaboration engagement look like in those scenarios? Because I honestly feel like a lot of the times the conferences are really more network gathering, right? And that network gathering allows people to sit down, and I can understand there's a lot of people from a lot of big companies that aren't allowed to go to conferences. And normally that's only on one reason. They don't trust their teams to go to these conferences and not talk about what they're doing because there's a huge arms race right now. Everyone's competing over who could deliver capacity faster. It's all about AI capacity right now. And if you're one of the members of FAMGA, you definitely don't want to send your teams to conferences knowing that they're going to potentially meet with other people and maybe trade notes on one of the things that, hey, this is how we're doing our distribution. This is how we're running our mechanical solution or whatever. And they don't want to give anyone else the advantage, right? But how else do you're saying we have to come together. We need to collaborate more. We need to start working together towards less on the, hey, golf clap, we've arrived and we're doing a really great job. Less of that and more onto what is the next solution that we together collectively need to go solve. And I know the OCP is trying to lead that, right? They're the ones that are trying to create standards, but as we scale, but if not going to, how do we collaborate? What does that network environment look like to where if it's not like a conference, is there workshops? Are there things that take place that are unofficial, like the underground data center fight clubs that take place to where you're allowed to sit down and start talking about shared notes and shared challenges and shared lessons learned to where we can advance this thing a little bit further and faster? Because there is an arms race, but there is a lot of necessity to engage and collaborate at the same time.
I think even the underground data center fight clubs are missing a gigantic opportunity, right? And they're less about, they try to prevent people from selling things, so you don't get but yet it happens. A lot of the sponsors come in and, because they sponsored it, and by all rights, if they paid money into it, they got to get some ROI on it, right? That's that is a capitalist society, and I love capitalism. I think that at this point, we probably have to think less capitalist and more holistic, a Smurf type of, and we need to pose a problem, and we need to come in with clear solutions, leaving the company at the door, right?
So at my conference, which you haven't been to, because I know you're not a conference fan, and I'm not trying to convince you to come. You don't ever have to come. But what I would share with you is I agree with everything you just said. And we're the only conference where we have sponsors that pay for it. And we don't let sponsors talk. The only reason why they pay for it is they get headline privileges to engage with directly those people that get on stages. Because I'm like, why do you care about getting on stage and telling them about your new flux capacitor or the next widget that you're iterated? That's, it's like someone telling me about another iPhone coming out. I know what the other ones do pretty well. I'm sure the other ones probably a little bit, the features may have changed a little bit. The screen may be a little bit wider, or the battery's longer, or maybe it's a little bit thinner, but other than that, it's an iPhone, right? And I almost look like, not to commoditize the entire supply chain to that level, but I'm like, okay, we know what you guys are capable of doing, but why don't you understand what they're doing? Let them get on stage, and these are the people that make the decisions that influence purchasing decisions, or that maybe they even issue POs themselves. But why don't you, instead of telling them what you do and telling them about your next advanced feature in your widget, why don't you come and listen to what they're needing? And that way you can pivot your ship. And you get headline privileges. They're going to actually talk to you and be like, hey, cool, that's what you do? Cool. I need this. And it may not be exactly what you do, but they could decide how to take, this is your vision, but you don't really bring it to life. You need the ecosystem to do it. When you were at Amazon, you weren't building data centers. I mean, your team technically was, but you still required trades and skills and crafts and materials and equipment and someone to come in and manage and supervise that probably for you too, right? So it still required a great deal of the ecosystem to bring that vision to life. Yes, you had that vision, but someone else had to deliver it on material and labor, right? I believe that these conferences should be focused on allowing these sponsors they are invested into the future. They're investing in a platform that allows the most innovative thought leaders of our industry to come in and talk about what we need to be doing next. So these sponsors that paid to be there and paid to have their voice, they get to go talk to them and be like, okay, cool. So tell me what your problem is. Yeah, we could actually go back to our manufacturing line and we could probably make 3 different changes to this. And that reduces the cost. Maybe you don't need as many meters on your electrical permutation. You just need to have 2 more things. I think what we're going to get to is major design changes. I think that you're going to see engines going away. I think that you'll be at some levels of topology, you'll see UPSs going away. I think that you're going to have the redundancy built at the network topology, at the network application, where they're going to have like a metroactive replication topology to where like, I'm not putting all my eggs in this one basket. I'll just rely on the network instead of the infrastructure or the MEP, and say if that data center goes down, then all my shit will replicate to the other places, right? And that's where the rest of my capacity is protected at, is on the network instead of on the engine side. Because how are you going to reduce your carbon footprint by adding more generators? You're going to have to figure it out somehow, right?
Need is the mother of invention. Kirk.
Yes.
And you make me smile here, because I do think that is for the suppliers, if they want to be relevant, attend those and go and get your engineering teams to be relevant, right? And what do I say that, right? So for example, right, like, and the faults in our industry, and I'll call out Google and Amazon on this one, right? Like, and I don't think I can get into trouble by calling out Google, maybe a little bit with Amazon, but let's just take a look at the 480 topology that we talked about, right? It is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do for expedited delivery of compute resources. It is the right thing to do by removing an entire layer of distribution in the middle that has caused some issues, both from availability, PDUs burning up on you, and liability and and cycle time perspective. Remove those things, and you have no idea of the internal fighting, whether you keep or go with PDUs. Google discovered it many moons ago, right? And we need to move that over to the networking equipment because, you're still having issues with, power supplies that top out at 250 volt, which isn't enough, to meet that 277 volt phase 2 neutral delivery, right? With that being said, that is stuff that should be somewhat shared rather than, I got a competitive advantage, right? Yeah. Because if assuming that the people on the other side of your competition are clever, they're all going to come out with the exact same solutions. One of the interesting things when, Christian worked at Microsoft and I worked at Amazon, and then we both worked at Microsoft where we could share, an incredible number of ideas converged from different viewpoints. So we ended up in the same place coming from different drivers. Right. Yeah. So the convergence, if, first of all, it's a reflection of the company. If the company's hiring, right, you've got engineers that will get you or technicians or, whomever that will get you, technologists that will get you to the next level. Right. If the solution is a given solution, they will end up in the same place. Accelerate it by sharing it. Right. And then driving the suppliers to come in and be innovative. Right. So tell me, DSC solution from Vertiv, is it good? It's a pretty decent solution. Has it run its course? Well, maybe if they can't get, an exchanger to get you water to the floor so you can, add an extra level of complexity, which is absolutely driving me insane with CDUs, like cooling distribution units on the floor to get you water to the floor. Right. Like suddenly you're not making things simpler. You're making things more complex. And the argument is, well, it needs to be more complex. And my counter argument is like, why?
Yeah, that's a horrible idea.
Why does it need to be more complex?
How do we simplify this thing for sure? Because the more complex it is the more constraint on labor it gives you.
Resources.
Yeah, to be able to maintain and facilitate the services and the upgrades and the things that go into this equipment. Do you have any examples of any of the things outside of like the things that you already mentioned? Are there any technology things that you think that we need to go away from, that this industry is missing right now? Do you think like, hey, I don't understand why the industry continues to use, arbitrarily RPPs instead of a bus line, ring bus system for distribute. I don't know. I'm not saying it should, by the way. I'm just arbitrarily making an example. Is there any sacred cows? That
I kind of smile when you said, so I take a look and I was, like I'm on the hunt for generators and, you can't go to the used market. It's exhausted. New market, right? Lead time, 140 weeks.
Isn't that crazy?
Right. So tell me, right. So I took a look at it and go, okay, 140 weeks for generators. I'm probably going to overpay for something like a gigawatt, a gigawatt plant. However, it'll give me 6, 8, 12 hours, whatever, run through to shut things down and come up if I do see an outage. Right. And the cost is about the same, right, as a generator per kW, and the lead time is substantially lesser, right? So guess what I'm going to do? Guess what I'm doing? Removing generators out of all my freaking designs.
How about that?
Yeah,
so like, fine, we'll figure out a solution. Like you said, necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So right. I think that supply chain, I think that there was a time where the tail wagged the dog, okay? And I've sat in meetings where large manufacturers of equipment that are giants and monsters in this industry, they've picked winners. They've picked who's going to do well. And that wasn't always the case, right? They were normally treated like a commodity and like put into a bake-off and like whoever's the cheapest wins. And like you said earlier, like when you were at Amazon, you're like, we'll take your soul. I mean, that's what all these operators are doing. It is a tough time to be in supply chain because the enterprise end users as well as the operators are armed to the effing teeth. They are massively sophisticated and they have done a lot of things. These procurement teams have never been better, right? But at the same time, if you're a data center operator, pick any market you want. It could be the Pacific Northwest, and and it's an oligopoly. This is a small industry. You know, there's small regional players in certain places, but you typically run into the same big shops throughout the country. Do you agree? It's like
all the same. It's the same players
Yeah.
over and over and over again, right?
If I go to the airport in Austin, I'm going to run into United, American, Delta, Southwest. But if I go to the airport in Dallas, it's the same, just like in California. And that's what I'm trying to say is you go to the Pacific Northwest, there's 3 operators and they're all competing over the same client. It could have been an AWS deal. Well, whichever one of those operators is going to get access to that supply chain, because if you're Mitsubishi or Toshiba, I'm not using them in, there's an example. Schneider, doesn't matter who it is, and they need to deliver arbitrarily 200 UPSs. Again, arbitrary example. They may not be able to support giving those to all 3 of them, so they're going to pick one that probably pays them more favorably, treats them a little bit better, more like a partner and less like a piece of shit commodity supplier, and they collaborate more with them. They're going to pick who wins, and whoever operator wins that one is most likely going to secure the confidence of the enterprise end user, because they could demonstrate how they have access to delivery of schedule. Volume and velocity are the product today, not technology, right?
Yeah. You know, you make me a giggle because, like I said, you know, what I did is I tried in a previous, you know, like when there was a big, you know, like a big drive on chips and no one could give you anything on time or on budget for chips. And I, you know, flew out, you know, having come from the oil field, it's like, man, I used to have to deal with latencies of like multi-seconds, you know, as we had, you know, a lot of these offshore oil rigs or pump stations controlled via satellite, right? So everything that was being done, this back in the day when everything was slow as an aux cart, right? So we would, you know, engineer solutions, and you know, so I floated the ideas like, listen, we got a chip supply constraint. Let's go to analog.
I think quantums will force a lot of things back to analog because listen, once you put quantum out there, there's nothing that it won't hack. There's no security level that it's not going to penetrate. People don't realize. People are like, I want quantum because it's such a buzzword, but you're like, you don't understand what quantum actually means. And when they say that, I'm like, go do a little bit more homework, because if you did, you would be in the fetal position in the evening sometimes, right? Don't you agree?
Oh no, 100%. You know, and the idea was puked on by my supply chain people, by my bosses, by everybody. It's like, move engineer. Like if you hire the right engineers, right? Again, goes by hiring the right, and I'm being very, you know, like a cast, the right technologists, right? Because it covers a broader. If you hire the right people, you have no problem that you can't work yourself around, right? You have 100, like, you know what the 140 week lead time for generators just tells me that
we don't need you. We'll engineer a solution that doesn't need you.
We are already starting, you know.
That's what I'm saying is they got the power. The tail started wagging the dog, and you had supply vendors and supply chain people that were picking winners and playing Caesar on who won based on who they were going to give their kit to, because the only person that could support that 100 megawatt requirement is the one that could get 100 megawatts worth of UPSs, and they don't have the ability to offer that to all of them. It's going to be whichever one that they kind of choose. That they're going to give each one of them the bid, and they're going to say, yeah, well, it's this much to you, this much to you, and this much to you, and an additional cost. They may have different delivery schedules for all of them.
And different costs.
Yeah, 100%. Because they're going to be like, why would I go and reward some jerk that takes all the profit out of my project or puts unrealistic expectations on schedule, when now I could go give it to a group that'll let me, they'll pay me faster, or they'll pay me without pain, or whatever it is, and they're going to win. But I think that the model will shift because the supply chain did earn the power, where the tail wagged the dog, and the supply chain had more leverage. I think that pendulum is shifting back, and I'm watching it take place right now, because now I'm watching the supply chain that used to be, I mean, I was at PTC and I was sitting at a table where I was around some people that make generators for a living, and they were very cavalier in the way that they were talking about engines, because they know that they have the prettiest thing on the planet and everybody wants them. And they're talking about, well, you know, maybe not, maybe we won't give them to them. Maybe, you know, and they're talking like that. And then finally you're like, okay, well, what's going to happen is someone like you or someone like a Jim Smith or someone else is going to come along and be like, watch this. Give me the one line again. Okay. Engineers coming in. I want all your propeller hats. Come in here and figure out how to do some long division to remove that entire cloud of equipment right there. What does that do? How many nines do I have as a byproduct of that now? Can I live with that? Is the industry ready to go with an N+1 or an N+, you know, whatever the topology looks like? I don't need 100% uptime on a 2N SLA. Now I could survive. And that is now the product. What happens when they get to the point where we're going to continue to remove pieces of supply chain away from this, as supply chain is not going to slow us up from delivering product?
Well, it can, right? Because I mean, you're going to put companies' entire wealth being on their investors and people like you and I, our ability to bring home the bacon for our families at risk, and I'm not going to live with that. Like I'm not going to accept that, right? We took a look. One of the things, like again going back, and one specific. I'm not going to mention the UPS supplier, but they wanted to bundle a UPS delivery along with power supplies that we needed to dunk in the dielectric fluid, right? So for us right now, we're putting everything in there. So power supplies for the servers are going in the fluid as well, right? So everything's in the tank. Right.
All right. Well, look, that's the shit that is bananas. Because when I got in this industry, if you were to told me that we were going to be doing that in 20 years from now, I'd be like, dude, what are you smoking? Right? There's no chance. But now you're like, okay, well, everything that sounds crazy is probably the closest that we're getting towards.
We gotta drive it that way.
It has to be disruptive.
And again, right? If you're going to tell me, like, you see all these delays and all these major cloud providers, and a lot of them are equipment focused. It's when can I get those generators, right? Guess what? Language learning models need 2 nines of reliability.
That's it. That application is all they need it for.
Because what happens if you shut me down, as long as I capture, I lose 5 minutes worth of compute, and then I pick up right where I left off once I have my assets back in place. I lost a bunch of revenue, but I didn't lose data, right?
I think that there will be I think that they're going to find other layers of technology within the overall product itself. If it may be not in a hardware application, maybe in a software application or something in the middle that's hybrid, but they're going to engineer themselves into a model where they're less dependent on the supply chain because they're so vulnerable, to where they're going to be like, we're going to figure out a way to get to the product that we need to without it. And the beauty is, it's going to be driven by the enterprise, because they're going to be the ones that decide whether or not they're willing to sign a contract with an operator, and they're going to expect the same product in their operator than they do when they build themselves. So as long as they're willing to move the needle on what they're doing on their own dog food, then it'll be easier for the operators to make the changes too, because the enterprise is what drives the change, right? So let me shift into a couple last segments, because I did want to make sure I give you the opportunity to explain to Oz what you're doing today. And if you feel like you've already covered that base and checked that box, then we're good. But is there anything, because in the next, this is the part of the podcast where I want to bring it home, and I want to cover some of the basic things. I want to, like, as an example, what do you tell people you do for a living right now?
Well, I'm the chief officer of infrastructure. What does that mean? Well, we try to find through hook and crook data center space to launch what we sell. Right, we're a small cloud provider focused on AI. Right, so without mentioning names, we usually have the GPUs available, and we actually put them on our own software. Right, so effectively for smaller operators, call it a school, a university, a district, or somebody who is trying to a startup that goes in very AWS like in the initial days. They need the GPU capacity, but they don't have the funds to buy their own GPUs. So they rent from us on our software. Right, so cloud services as a software, we don't find ourselves, and we don't think we're competitors to any of the cloud providers. We don't have $1 trillion evaluations, right, and we don't have $1 trillion to spend on the infrastructure, so we have to be very specific on how we parse it out. But we do run some pretty cool programs, and we do. One thing that we're offering is, when we stand up our clusters, because we pay a lot of attention to the thermal and electrical distribution on air cool and of course liquid immersed cool, we're pretty successful, right? We're seeing very few infant mortality drop-offs when we bring up compute clusters, right? So we're being absolutely fanatical on how we manage our placement, our distribution, our thermal throughput on the servers that we have out there. Right, we have several tanks where we do a liquid immerse testing across the different suppliers of fluid to make sure that the servers that are going to be dunked are going to be operational. Our thermal or mechanical electrical drop off, right? So failure rates on the liquid immerse servers is 0. So for a year of operating, we've not seen one failure due to a thermal event, right? One of the things that, going out there and taking a look at, and you mentioned industry changes, right? We need to be more open-minded, like ASHRAE, looking at that 25 degrees C temperature. We need to revisit that, right?
And increase it, you're saying?
Increase it. We have to, right? Because that realizes less resources and cooling, and it also allows us to hit the holy grail, which is like ultimate densities across those servers. If we can operate more hotter, we can put more of them closer together. We need less cooling to provide the operational environment for them.
Yeah. So everything you're talking about right now is predicated or designed around an AI environment, right? It's not based on one vertical of industry or one geography of where we're doing compute. Go ahead.
It's everywhere. Right. Okay. So if you know, for example, let's take a look, we can take our tanks up to 55 degrees C. We free cool up to 55 degrees C, right? That's pretty well everywhere in the world, right? So we have a dry cooler. We have the pumps that recircle. So what we need to, this is predicated on having, right, minimizing at least thermal stress on these devices anywhere in the world, across any industry, in any geography. So regardless of air density, regardless of entropic pressure in the desert, right? So for us, right, trying to get there as we drive, these GPUs can operate 85 degrees C, right? That's pretty darn hot for a data center environment. For us, it's making sure that wherever we deploy, our PUE, I was looking at it the other day and we had an interesting, we usually run a PUE of, you heard it here first, 1.01, 1.02 across our liquid immersed environments. And we saw it go up in Calgary to 1.04. So
at what density? Just curious.
What do you mean? We're looking at 100 kW tank density, right? So we saw it go up at 1.04. So I got on the horn. It's like, what is going on? Like we got, it's colder. It was during the cold spell in Calgary, and we're looking worse. And all of a sudden it dawned on me,
cool lesson.
Liquid viscosity, right? Because the mineral oil got colder, it got thicker, those pumps had to work harder. So we actually lost.
That makes more sense. Yeah, you had to pump harder. That makes sense.
We had to pump harder, right?
That's how you learn.
Yeah, that's how we learn, right? Eventually, so I set the entire team out to go hunt what was happening inside our containers to make sure that nothing had gone wrong. Because, to me, usually cool air means, better PUE. Not in this case, because we're dealing with viscosity. So it's like, So actually, it made sense. In the summer, we're seeing low drop-offs because of the higher temperatures and lower viscosity. So these are the things that are really quite innovative, right? And having your finger on the pulse of it will tell you that, there may be design changes. So what did we do immediately? It's like, we need a reheat loop, right? Because, this is at a temperature of minus 30 degrees.
Yeah, who would have thought of that?
Right? So all of a sudden it's like, okay, can we use some of this, because the servers are still generating heat. Are we, we set up a bypass to make sure we started recircling and trying to heat that fluid up because,
I imagine that shouldn't be hard.
It wasn't hard at all, but it opened up is like, does this
what a great idea.
Fluid become non-Newtonian at a certain temperature? Because if the fluid becomes non-Newtonian, the oil, then you got another problem, which is not enough horsepower in the world is going to allow you to.
It's not cooling enough fast.
So it opened a whole new discovery silo, right? And I was smiling like.
But that's in your brain. That seems like it's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, it all is. But it was like, oh wow, never thought of this. But the cool thing about it was, and it was all there in front of us. If we would have looked at the data, it would have told us what we needed to do. But it was a pretty cool little discovery. Yeah, it's like, that's a consideration, check that box.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of exciting things. Like I get to talk to all kinds of really smart people. So I get to learn all kinds of cool nerdy shit that they're all working on. And everyone has like a passion project or something that they believe in. It sounds like, in your case, it's all about solving for density, right? And that's what your company's at right now. Look, what else do you think is going to be necessary, in the final minutes of this podcast? Give me anything else that you have on what you see us needing to do to make monumental changes, meaningful changes to industry from a density perspective. What other barriers do we need to stop self-imposing on ourselves to make sure?
Good friend of mine used to always tell me, Oz, when you're talking, you're not listening. And I think that a barrier for us is the ability to listen. We have to listen. And this, I think you're hitting on it too, even with your conference and stuff, right? We have got to listen, right? Even if the ideas are outlandish, give them a minute, right?
The companies that normally sponsor our shit, like DCAC, we have like 5 different groups right now that want to be the title next year, right? And that's a good problem to have, I guess. But at the same time, I'm like, which group will have the ability to talk? Because if you are sponsoring, you're not going to be on stage, but you're going to get a lot of time with the speakers. You're going to be at all the VIP events with if you run an engine company and you're a title sponsor as an example, then what you're going to do is you're going to be spending time with all the luminaries that are going to be on stage. And those are the people that are the visionaries that are driving the industry's changes. And that way those manufacturers could walk away and be like, hey, we're there. We're 90% there. These are the things they want. This allows them to reach a density level that we didn't know. So we need to make a little bit of changes. Maybe it's on this loop system where, hey, recirculate that oil back around the radiator. Maybe it gets a little bit warm naturally through gravity or something to where the viscosity gets thinner and lets it pump higher, which again, reduce your PUE or whatever it is you're trying to solve for. But like, they're not going to know that stuff. They're engineers or they're leaders that want to solve the problem, but they don't know how to connect the needs of the industry's growth demand to the capabilities that they have as a business. They're building something, but it's no different than imagine they're playing baseball, but no one's behind the plate telling them which ball to throw. They're just throwing it and they're like, the plate's that way, I'm going to throw it that direction. But they don't understand that every hitter is different. And they need to tuck the ball in a different way, right? So we kind of need to have a catcher system of thought leaders, I think, that are like, no, let me help you call the shot a little bit better. And if you can help call the strikes from the manufacturers better and help influence what the manufacturers are doing, I think that we'll be able to solve for the density challenges that you have. So I think you're going to have to collaborate more with these manufacturers and let them know the densities you're trying to solve for and help them get to something where they can manufacture the solutions around what your needs are.
Yes. And there are two, from a server perspective, right? SMC Supermicro, tight partners with NVIDIA and Intel. It's actually kind of fun working with those guys, right? Because they come in, right, with their engineering teams and you kind of riff, right?
Yeah, it's a whiteboard brainstorming.
Yeah, and it is always a riff and they're always listening, right? And their engineers are taking notes and they're pretty freaking good engineers too, right? They're taking notes and they all schedule a follow-up, right? So you have the first one is listen, we're trying to build this, you're riffing, you're whiteboarding, and then comes the follow-up, right? And the entire team goes away, took the entire discussion super seriously, and that doesn't happen with everybody. And they come back and they say, we think we can work together on this.
That's cool.
100% of the time, right? Love working on companies that are, technology driven, run by technologists.
Well, listen, let's do this. I want to thank Alfonso Portillo for introducing the two of us, right? Because without his passion for OLED data and what he's doing with the Lighthouse Data Center, and I know that you've been on his podcast, I'm not sure if his has hit the street with you
Not
yet.
yet.
Yep. So, and ours will hit the street after his does, I'm sure. I don't want to steal his thunder because I'm a huge fan of what he's doing and I want to help support what he's all about. But I do hope that this isn't the last time that we talk. I hope that this is just the first. And then what we can do is I want to convince you to maybe change the way that you view things, including, conferences. You're right. Most of the conferences they're interesting, right? I'm not saying they're unnecessary. But mine isn't about that. Mine's about trying to bring the capabilities of the ecosystem, which are necessary to bring the visions to life, to the visionaries themselves. And those sponsors to our conference, they benefit greatly by being able to sit down and have those conversations. It may not be a riff or a design charrette, but they're having an exchange of ideas to where someone could go back and be like, hey, look, we think that we're solving for something, but we need to raise the bar 50 points higher than that. And we need to solve for this because that's where they're going. Let's start working on that. And that way we could be the first ones to get there. Right. So
it's for me, one more thing, right? And I saw this on Facebook and it was super, I'm a big believer in animal causes, and there's a picture of a cat. All our cats are rescued. They've all had these stories. I'll write a blog about each one of them here in the next couple of weeks. But the story was treat this animal well because you never know where they've been. Same thing with people. Treat them well because you don't know what they've gone through from a day-to-day basis, diverse basis, growing up basis, right? What got me here was my ability to see my parents suffer and having to work for their kids, right? With dad giving me the last $5 so I could go watch a movie and the last $5 in his pocket. So for people, right? Like if anything at all, be nice to people. Right?
Yeah.
You don't know what they've been through. You don't know what kind of day they've had, and you don't know what brought them to this spot. I'm super thankful for you offering me this spot to.
Oh, this is awesome.
Riff. This is awesome. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, and thank you. You talked about evolution versus revolution, and that's why this podcast is called the Data Center Revolution. I believe more in the revolution than the evolution of this industry. This industry is going to evolve in spite of and because of itself, but the revolution has to be intentional. So thanks for coming on here and bringing your credibility, your validation, your experience, and sharing it with me, right? Because we would have never met otherwise if we didn't have this platform, but I'm glad that we did. And I hope that this is just the first of many times that I get to have these exchanges with you. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks.